Okay, great. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. I mentioned in the email that I sent out with the Zoom link, this presentation is being recorded and will be sent out with the reminder to next week's presentation. So you do have to wait a week to get this recording, but that was done so that we minimize the emails that are necessary from this program. So that'll be sent out by 3 p.m. On July 21st, the day before our next presentation on the 22nd. For today, just to maintain the webinar quality, everyone is going to be muted. And we ask that you keep your video turned off. If I see videos turned on, I will just turn them off as the host, okay? So you'll not be able to unmute yourself today so that we have, the best quality for the presentation. However, you can utilize the chat box. So that chat box will be available to you throughout the entire presentation. At the end, we're going to do questions. So feel free to put in questions as we go or hold them to the end. Either way, I'll try to scan back and get all of our questions that are relevant. Okay. And I'll let you know when that question time comes along. Let me admit some more people. Okay, so I think that covers everything with the Zoom orientation and how things will work. Feel free to toggle to the speaker view once we get started, and that way you'll see Jim's screen large and front and center, and it'll get rid of all just the names that are floating out there. Okay, so without further ado, today's topic is not solely focused on pest management per se, but it really does have a huge potential for education between growers that are working in urban agriculture settings, including pest management strategies. Today, we're welcoming Jim Jasinski to talk about the 360-degree tours of model urban ag farms in Ohio. Jim Jasinski is the Ohio State University Extension, is with the Ohio State University Extension, and is a professor and the Integrated Pest Management Program Coordinator. So I will turn it over to you, Jim.
All right, great, Maggie. Thank you for the introduction. I don't know what else to say. I've been sort of doing this for a while. The extension piece, this whole 360 modeling piece is relatively new. I think it's really exciting. So I'm very much looking forward to discussing it with you and seeing if it sort of sparks anything within you to maybe go forward and try to do this on your own farm. I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it, and then we'll take questions at the end. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we can begin. Okay, I need to adjust my view right here. There we go. All right, so as Maggie introduced, this is the 360-degree tour model urban ag farms in Ohio. So some of these images that you see here are kind of representing the things that we're going to be getting into a little bit later in the discussion. And so the roadmap for today is, why 360 technology, what does it bring to the table? And really, it's got, in my view, really wide application, which I'm going to demonstrate to you here in just a few minutes. It's very immersive. It's very different, I think, than sort of two-dimensional information that you may have seen before. Just pictures of things, text of things. It's different than video, and that video is still very linear. You can only see, what the director wants you to see. You can't see other things. It's really teleporting in a way, and I'm sort of, part of that Star Trek generation, where you jump into the transporter and next thing you know, you're halfway around the world. That's really kind of what this technology can do to you in a way. It's very exploratory, meaning, you can look at things that are not really necessarily the primary interest of the person who made the tour, but you might find something interesting there to sort of look at. and it's self-guided. Again, they're really, there's kind of a start, but there's really no end. So it's really up to your curiosity and the things that you want to see sort of guides where you go in this 360-degree world. So as an educator, what was my interest here? Why did I even get into this? Excuse me. And really, it's experimenting with these novel methods of information, outreach, teaching, demonstration. All these things really, as you can imagine, got pushed to the edge, to the forefront rather, during the last couple of years. And so it had been things I've been thinking about for a while, but really forced me to implement them during the course of the pandemic. Part of what we have done here, one of the original intents was that I was going to be part of a potential online urban ag course. And the discussion came up, a very big part of that is the experiential piece, people going to an urban farm, actually seeing how it operates, talking to the owner, operator, kind of getting their questions answered, kind of seeing things with their own eyes. But then with the pandemic, there's issues with travel. People couldn't make it. Maybe it's expensive to travel these days with gas prices and whatnot. So this was really going to try to fill that gap of the experiential piece in that potential urban ag online course, which we are still kind of wrestling with at the moment. And from a grower perspective, I think it's interesting to think about kind of a more real representation of your farm operation. If you have a website and it's got some pictures up there and some text, or maybe a video, that kind of gives you one dimension of the farm. But this kind of is going to bring a different dimension to that farm and more of a tour aspect, I would say, of the farm. And it can be, of the fields. If you have a high tunnel operation, you can show that. If you have a marketplace, if you have a packing shed that you want to show people, a cafe, bar, restaurant, something like that, a petting zoo, kind of a U-pick area, you've got, sunflower patch, you do wagon rides, whatever. All those things can kind of be represented within this type of 360 matrix. So the things I think that are in common with both those groups, both the educators and the growers, is really just a very unique way to show these farms and the diversity of these farms. One farm is not, the cookie cutter model for the entire state or even the Midwest. I think it does attract growers into the farming space just because of the novelty of it. It can spark your imagination and innovation about what urban farms can be. You can have the owner operator tell the story of why they have this farm. A lot of times there's reasons that these farms are kind of in the areas that they're in. We're going to look at these OSU pilot projects in Mansfield and Worcester areas primarily, which are single owner operated type farms, or they could be cooperatives, or they could be research oriented. So lots of different things going on there. So that's the roadmap for today. So a question is, what are these 360 tours? What do they look like? Well, they're really a collection of 360-degree panoramic images that are stitched together to form the sort of circular environment that you can look at. You can look left, you can look right, you can look up, you can look down, you can kind of pan in on things and pan back out again. It requires special cameras with special lenses of technology. And then, all of that is kind of working together in the background to bring you this very unique experience. If in the past couple of years, anyone out there was in the market to buy a new house or even rent property, this picture on the bottom right, instead of actually physically visiting the space, a lot of realtors actually made 3D models, 360-degree models of the property, so that you could walk up and down the stairs, basically open closets, go through doors, walk through the entire place virtually and never have stepped foot on the property to see if you liked it or not. So that's an application of the 360. If anybody out there in the past year or two has tried to buy a car and didn't actually want to go to the dealership, you could build one online. And then one of the options is obviously to look at the outside from different angles, but once you get inside the interior of the car, you can then pan left, pan right, look behind you, see if there's enough space to reach back there and either, smack your kids if you need to, or say, Johnny, quit beating up on Susan. So it's really kind of a neat thing. It's just a different application of this 360 technology. So where and when did this all begin? For me, it really began way back in like 2018 and 2019. I had this concept of, we have this pumpkin field day every year here at the Western Ag Research Station, and we get people that come from across the state and even, states nearby. But there's a lot of people that can't make it because of the travel restriction. So I started thinking about, how could we preserve this sort of field day environment, for lots of people to look at down the line if they couldn't make it that day. And this was one of the ideas that I had. And so, as I mentioned, 2020, the pandemic really pushed all of the in-person programming kind of off the map. And we really had to do a lot of these virtual meetings, which turned out to be Zoom meetings, which after a while of Zoom, you kind of get a little tired of that. And so I was thinking, let's try something different. Let's try this 360. Let's go ahead and make it happen. And so I was able to get connected to a consultant who did this kind of work. And together, we did this field tour in 2020 of our pumpkin field day. And we also, did more of it in 2021. At the same time, we threw in those 4 urban farms that we had talked about, both kind of a spring and a summer view of the farm, because the farm changes over the season. So we not only wanted to show you different farms in different areas, but how does that farm change over time, the activities of that farm. So now comes the technology piece, and there is some technology that goes into all of this. It doesn't just happen with, your standard 35 millimeter camera. Lots of variety in cameras, a lot of innovation, a lot of different price points, meaning, $1 sign versus $10 signs. But they all have these few things in common. They have either these 180-degree fisheye lenses, which we're going to show you a better picture of. And so that's a lens that basically takes from your far right all the way to center to far left picture at one time. And then if you take one to the front and one to the back, then you have a sphere that's around you. And that's the sphere, the bubble that gets stitched together to make this 360-degree tour actually happen. So that's what we have going on with that. If you look at this camera on the left and on the right, that's really the Ricoh Theta Z1 that we've used for most of these tours. And those are fairly reasonable cameras to use. They're about $1,000. If you look to this second one to your left, this is a Matterport camera, and it's actually got 3 sets of lenses on it. One set of lenses looks straight forward, one set of lenses aims up, and one set of lenses aims down. So when you take pictures, you're getting a lower image, a straight image, and an image upward, really high definition. So when you combine all those images, you get a very crisp, very clear sphere that you can move around inside of. So this is the Ricoh Theta Z1 that I mentioned to you. You can see in this right-hand image how the lens is kind of bubbled out like a fisheye lens. Okay, so you get 180 degrees on this side of the camera and 180 degrees on the other side of the camera. When you take a picture and take both those halves and piece them together, that gives you that 360-degree, that spherical image of the area that you're in. And this camera is fairly economical, about $1,000. So I know that might sound expensive, but when you get into this operation, $1,000 is actually, not that bad a price. So how does this work? So we're just going to sort of show some process here, and then later on we're going to actually go and visit the farm. So let's just say this is John's Urban Oasis Farm, and John's got high tunnels, he's got raised beds and an herb garden, a packing shed. He's got a little market where he sells things. So what we can do here is we're just going to go through and we're going to be taking pictures of all of these different parts of the farm, okay, with this specialized camera. And then the way you can think of it is sort of in your head, if you're going to give a tour and sort of start somewhere, walk through the property and sort of end, then that's the path you would take to go ahead and make those images, okay? And so when you put all those images together, those are going to be the opportunities for people to stop, look around, and see what's at that location. Okay, so that could be sort of one big tour of your entire farm. Another way to look at it would be to break those areas into very distinct tours. So the first tour would be the raised beds, the second tour would be the herb garden, the third would be the market, the fourth would be the packing shed, and the last one would be the high tunnel. And then you can stitch all those together sort of into one web page. So something like this. So you're giving more or less, let's just say, an aerial view of the farm. And then people say, oh, I want to go to the cafe. And they would click on the cafe area, go in, take that tour, look around, come back out, pop over to the pumpkin patch, look around, come back out, go over to the you pick berry area, see what's going on there, check out your sunflowers, see what's at the petting zoo, and that's that. So these are all sort of mini tours that would be inside of this one way to represent how the different aspects of your farm could be shown using this 360 technology. Of course, once you take all those pictures, then that's not where it ends. That's kind of where it begins. Then you have to stitch them together, sort of put them together, you know, one in front of the other, in front of the other, so that it makes sort of a seamless corridor from the beginning of the tour to the end of the tour. And this software that we use is called Cloud Pano. And you know, there's different versions of it. There's different price points of it. You can have a low price point of $10 per model, or you can get an annual subscription if you do a lot of these, you know, so it just depends on how you want to do it. But this is the software that the consultant that I worked with is using, but there's many kinds of software out there to stitch. It's just, you know, and they're getting better all the time, but how easy is it? And what are the sort of some of the ins and outs of it? Really not that bad, but it's just something just to be aware of. This is where all the magic happens. And then out the final version pops the actual tour. So now we're going to kind of walk into the experience of the urban ag tours. You know, again, there's 4 farms up in the primarily northeast part of Ohio, Mansfield and Worcester area. We have at least 2 models of every location. We have a model what's going on in the spring, and which is kind of Aprilish, and a model which is going on in the summer, which is kind of late July-ish. And then along with that is an interview with the actual owner or operator of the farm saying, this is the intent of the farm, this is the inspiration of the farm, this is why this farm is here. And I find those interviews really interesting and inspiring. Lots of different reasons why people do this. So I think that's really important that you get a chance to tell your story about your farm. So again, our goal was to highlight the diversity of those farms, to kind of create that visual spark, empower people to imagine, you know, what an urban farm could be, you know, maybe inspire them to start their own urban ag farm, small, build it up, you know, what are the various components. And then, you know, in terms of growers, what are they getting out of it? You know, introducing people to the farm, you know, it's a chance to do a little bit of marketing, you know, maybe increase some traffic or interest, you know, tell people the story of the farm, you know, why it's there, you know, what the purpose of it is, you know, obviously making money is one of the purposes, but even, you know, more social reasons beyond that. So that's kind of the big picture that we need to look at. And now we're going to go ahead and actually take a look at how these farms, these tours are constructed. So this is a big monster link at the bottom here. I don't expect you to copy it, but or try to retype it. But if you search for it, you'll probably be able to find it a bit easier. So this is a page that's set up on the OSU Urban Ag or Urban Extension team. And what I've done is compress all of what you need to know about using these models or these tours in about 2 minutes. So instead of listening to me here, you could always just go and listen to me for 2 minutes there and kind of get the same amount of information, I think. Just very concise. Below the introduction are the 4 locations. You see it's CFAS Worcester Campus, OSU Mansfield Micro Farm, the North End Community Improvement Collaborative Farm, which is sort of multi grower farm, which is really interesting concept, and then the Grow Forth Urban Farm in sort of downtown Mansfield. So we're going to just pop in here one by one and take a look and see, you know, what these look like. So we're going to start off with the Worcester Campus Farm. And what you see is this little introduction here by Matt Kleinhens. He is the, I guess, the director of these farms at the Worcester location on the formerly OARDC campus. So he tells you a little bit of story about them. You can see what the farm sort of looks like in the spring. And then if you go further down, you can kind of see what the farm looks like more in the summer. And what we do is we try to start at the exact same point for both of these, so you can really seamlessly go from what you recognize in the spring to what you recognize more in the summer. And the summer is just really, I think, more inherently attractive because there's more foliage, but we'll just take a quick look here to show you a few things. So you can either just look at these little chevrons and navigate to those locations. As long as we're here, I can actually grab this picture and I can swing it to the left. So this is showing you everything that's all the way around where this image is taken. Okay. Farms, barns, parking lots, cars, everything that's here. Okay. And we're back to the beginning. Hopefully no one got seasick on that. Motion sickness. You can look down at the ground and you can say, oh, that's a heck of a crop of henbit or red dead nettle, whatever that happens to be right down here. You can, look up and see the sky, kind of a partly cloudy day right there, I'd say. Hit these little chevrons to move to that spot, and you can just see more and more of what's there. You can go actually inside the tunnel. Okay, now you're inside the tunnel. Now, the thing about these 360 cameras is there's no hiding anything. There's no place you can't see. Like, this is a picture. I can't see what's behind me or to the left or to the right. But if I swing this over, I can see there's, just some miscellaneous equipment that's there. Okay, I can swing back to the left. I can see they've got a little bed started there. I can see the hose and the siphon. Okay, I can see what's on the ground, the covering there to prevent the weeds from coming up. And then I can walk forward and just see everything that's kind of going on. You can kind of peer down a little bit, see what's happening here, go all the way to the back. And this is actually a cover crop that's planted back here. Okay. And then you can spin around and see the high tunnel that's next to it. And you can see the high tunnel from where you came. Okay. So that's sort of basic navigation. Let's go down to the summer view. And what we see here is there's more stuff going on. There's actually plants growing. Now, if you look over to the right, you can see this icon here. This is the full screen icon. I think this is the best way to take a look at this. If I click on this, it expands the entire screen. Now I'm actually I feel like I'm standing in this high tunnel. And as I look a little bit to the left, you can see these bean plants. I can look to the right and see these bean plants. Okay, I can look behind me just like I showed you before. Okay, really pretty interesting. Now this is in July, a few months later. You can go up a little bit if you want and just see kind of the different things that are going on inside the tunnel. So it's kind of interesting. Maggie mentioned pest management. So as we're looking at this, if there was something on this leaf, I can actually zoom in a little bit. Okay, I could see something a little bit closer on that leaf if I wanted to. Okay, not HD resolution, but pretty good. And so we're going to see that later on. And so that's really all I wanted to show you with that tour. We can just escape out of it. And now we'll go down to this last one, which is a tomato greenhouse, high tunnel, I should say. And we're going to step inside the high tunnel. And unfortunately, this was just after a harvest, so there's not much red fruit. But you can kind of look in here and you can see different things. Okay, you can see how they have their irrigation set up. You can see the Florida weave going on. You can see different stages of fruit development. Again, you can see how they use this fabric to keep the weeds down. Just anything you might find interesting here, you just take a look around and you can see it, which is pretty cool, I think. Okay. If you wanted to, you can take a look at what's going on in these end gables. I don't think there's any fans that are put in here. This is the little weather system that they put to monitor the temperature and the humidity that's actually in the high tunnel. Okay. Back here is the fertigation system. So lots of different neat things that you can see from this. Okay. So I'm going to back out of this. We are going to leave Worcester and we're going to go on to our next location. And that's going to be the OSU Mansfield Microfarm. This is Dr. Kip Curtis. He's in charge of the OSU Mansfield Microfarm. Does a really good job of explaining the purpose of the farm. We can see that even in the spring, there's a few things going on. So we'll just pop in there and take a quick look. Then we can take a few steps inside the high tunnel and see that there's a little bit of lettuce growing here and there, a few small plants growing here and there. Not a tremendous amount, just a little bit. Okay. Like everyone's got their little wash area back there. This is something I wanted to point out to you that since this camera takes 360-degree pictures, you can see that that's myself and that's Zach. We're always in these images somewhere, either myself or Zach, because you have to be sort of near the camera when you take a picture. Usually Zach is hiding, but in this picture, I guess we're just right out in the wide open. You know, different parts of the farm. So not terribly exciting there. So if we want to leave this image, and then we'll go down and check it out more in the summer when things are going on. Now what we're going to see is as we walk into the same high tunnel from the same location, there's all kinds of growth activity going on here, right? Looks like collards are happening. We had some things that have already gone to seed. You know, there's definitely some activity that's in here. We can pop back out again to the parking lot area. There's Zach. We can walk out here and we can see the high tunnel on the far side, and we can see the raised beds. Okay, so this is a big area in between these two high tunnels. You can see that they've got the weed fabric here to kind of keep the weeds down, which is great. We can walk down between these raised bed areas and see some of these plants look healthy and some of them don't look as healthy. So we've got some nice looking pepper plants over here. And then we have some that are a little paler and a little yellower over here. Okay, so you can pick up different bits even of nutrient management just based on looking at these images. So we're going to spin around. We're going to come back over here to the edge of the high tunnel. Hopefully, there we go. And a little bit of a lag, but we're fine. Come back out to the front. And then we're going to get ready to walk into this high tunnel. And lots of activity going on inside the high tunnel. So, I mean, looks like no one's there, but guess what? Someone's hard at work doing some harvest work here. You can see the tomatoes are starting to grow. There's some red tomatoes or some green tomatoes, just basic production within the greenhouse. So it's kind of cool. And I don't know which image I saw, but somewhere here, you could actually see a tomato that looked like it was struggling a bit. And if you zoomed in on it, it was, I'd say about 90% confident that I would say it's blossom end rot. You can just see that much detail, even with this, here it is right here, fairly low res. So can you see this fruit right here? And if we zoomed in a little bit, it looks like it's got blossom end rot or some other potential disease happening right there. So you can see, you know, what kind of diseases or physiological conditions were going on. You see some leaf roll going on here, a little bit of plant stress. Again, you see it over here, so it may be just a variety thing, but yeah, just kind of interesting to see that. Okay, so we're going to be leaving OSU Mansfield Microfarm and heading to this North End Community Improvement Collaborative. This is Deanna West Torrance. She's the site manager of this location, and she has a really great story about the inception of this farm and what it's trying to do. And basically, there are 7 or 8 tenant farmers that are in here that are all growing together, all independent operations, but all together at the same site. So this is, again, in the springtime. And what's really neat, let me kind of get you into the full screen mode, is you look down in April, and there is all of this lettuce that's being grown, just beds and beds of lettuce, which is really, pretty amazing, I think. You can look at the irrigation system. You can see it's not really drip. It's these little spray emitters, which is kind of neat. Okay. You can see the sides are open for ventilation. And we're just going to walk through these different houses. And now we're in a different house. You can see different type of lettuce over here that's being grown. You can see there's Zach trying to hide, but he's not hiding very well. It's a window, basically. We go into the next operation and look at this. We have a different crop. Looks like collards are being grown here. So you can just see the detail and how the crop health is. It's really pretty amazing just to see the diversity of crops here. These are all just covered raised beds under this high tunnel, which allows them to be grown much earlier than if they were outside. Again, another crop here of looks like maybe spinach or another type of leaf, lettuce. And looks like it might be a little bit of stress in some of those plants, but again, just beds and beds of this green early in the season. And you can pick up, now we're having a little different irrigation technique. We have all this drip tape going through the beds, not the spray emitters. So that's how this grower prefers to water their crop. So you can pick up things like that, which I think is pretty amazing. And I think we have one more spot to go. Yeah, and so then this is maybe the last house here. And you can see they're getting ready to harvest this lettuce over here on the left. Okay, this is all mature, ready to go out to the market. And this is just planted a little bit behind it here. And it looks like they've got some tomatoes planted there on the edge. Now, I think if I click on this, I'm going to go outside the tunnel completely. No, I don't think that's going to happen. Yes. Okay. Now we're magically transported to these beds that are outside of the high tunnel that was right next to us. So we can walk through walls just like Superman can. You just take a look at these raised beds that they have outdoors. There's different crops growing in them there. You can see they're kind of, in flux in the spring, trying to get some crops in, trying to get, some of the management down for this area. And it's really, again, just kind of neat to be able to see this firsthand. And of course, we can come back to that location, more in the summer, and all those empty beds, they're now full of different crops, beans, different types of collards, lots of different things growing. Some peppers here, looks like some onions or leeks over there, maybe some endive on the far side. So it's really pretty interesting to see these farms and be able to look at the diversity of the operation. So by now you're kind of getting the flow of what this all looks like. That's sort of a larger scale urban farm. Again, it's really a cooperative of 7 or 8 independent growers at one location, which is kind of cool. And the last one we're going to look at is a different niche altogether. This is Amanda Stanfield. She's right in downtown Mansfield. Very interesting person, very interesting grower. The reason for her farm, it's a great story if you want to listen to it. It's really kind of a heartwarming story. Here we are in the spring, not too much going on, apparently. And then in the summer, a lot more happening. So let's just dive in here. I want to show you this operation. This is one of my favorites. Okay, so you see what looks like, standard raised beds on either side, okay, of the 2 high tunnels in the front. What's interesting, though, is if you spin this around, this is where they live. So they live right next to the farm. They had to buy this piece of property through lots of interesting processes and then begin farming it. So not a whole lot going on the raised beds right now, but let's pop inside the high tunnel and see what's there. And so these are very nice high tunnels. I mean, nice gravel floors. You can see they've got really nice raised beds. They've got good irrigation system. They've got trellises up, for plants that grow tall. They've got their water supply over on that side and some transplants waiting to go in. They've just got some other access tools on this side. Really kind of neat, just kind of getting started here in the spring. we go down a little bit and you can see that there's some lettuce crops in there a little bit, finishing up. But just a really neat operation. You can see through to the other side here. I'm not sure if I can get there from this. No, I can't get through on this one. So I have to go back out and then walk into the next one. And walk next door. It's kind of interesting the way these are all set up, these different modules. And then we pop in here and they've got a bunch of peas growing up on strings. Okay, you can see they've got more supplies here. They've got the strings up to the top of the rafters there. And it just is a nice little farm. Okay, it's really, really well kept. Great diversity of crops. It's just a neat little place plunked right down in the center of Mansfield. And then if we come back more in the spring, oh, I guess that was my alarm. Come back more in the spring, we're almost done here, or more in the summer, excuse me. What you can see is just all these raised beds that were outside are just full of vegetables now. So you've got carrots down here to the left and to the right. Kind of interesting to see that. A little bit of lag here on my side, but that's okay. We'll get back to this other high tunnel on the far side. And you can see she's got some tomatoes growing there. There we go, looks a little bit better. And so got some tomato production on those raised beds. And things are looking pretty good, really. So it's just neat to be able to look around these operations at different times of the year and see what's growing, see the health of the plants, see the diversity of operation, the diversity of crops. And that's kind of what we have. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this presentation, and I'm going to get back to my PowerPoint. Okay. So in terms of that imaging history, we started off really doing the initial work in Pumpkin, and that was around South Charleston. That's where I'm at right now, kind of around Springfield area. That was in 2020. In 2021, we started looking, up and doing that project around Mansfield and Worcester, got those 4 farms there imaged. Maggie Rivera was able to write a grant this year and get funding to do even more urban farms up around Cleveland and Akron as a part of that research project, that funding. She's also going to try to put 2 locations in around the Dayton or Cincinnati area. So we have this sort of southwest northeast corridor. And what I really hope that we can continue to fill in some of these more blank areas, like the northwest part of Ohio, around the Columbus area, and maybe down the southeast part of Ohio in the next year. So that we'll have diversity of location and diversity of farm that's there, that people can take a look at and say, oh, I like pieces of this and like pieces of this, but I don't really maybe want to do that, or this gives me an idea to try something new. Are we reaching people? I think the answer is yes. We haven't really done any advertisement for any of these. We're still just sort of sitting on these until we find a great application. But the early on pumpkin and squash projects that we did, 260 some views. The Grow Forth Farm, 300. The NECIC, a little bit fewer, around 60 or 70. The Mansfield Micro, almost 300. The Worcester location, almost 500 or 600. So people are finding these. People are looking around. There's no real evaluation of these, unfortunately. It's just people show up, look around, take from it what they can, and sort of move on. So if we're going to really put these out there to be consumed, to figure out what people are liking, we probably need to come up with some kind of an evaluation model so that we can say, yes, more of this or less of that. Okay, my final thoughts. Sort of a very novel way to show and maybe market that farm experience to customers, maybe other potential growers, give people that inspiration that they might want, that little spark that they might need. And I think it's just different than taking just static pictures of your farm and posting them or having a web page. It's just kind of like that next generation, I think. So one thing I didn't really talk about was anywhere inside those models, you can add text to highlight things. You can add images or pictures to highlight things. You can add audio. You can add video clips inside of those 360-degree models. So lots of opportunity to explain things from an educational standpoint, as well as why are we doing what we're doing in this location. So really quite flexible that way. Again, a great chance for you to map out those areas of interest on your farm that you want to talk about, that you want to highlight, that you think this is what makes my farm unique and cool and what I want to show people, all those various things that we mentioned before. And, you don't have to have this done by a consultant like we did. I just did it because it was easier and we had the funding. But if I didn't have the funding, I probably would have gone through and bought the camera and learned the stitching myself. But I don't think it's extremely difficult. So you buy the camera, you learn the technology, you learn how to stitch these pieces together, and then you can make any tour that you want. You can change tours. You can do lots of things. I think it's very flexible. I think it's very accessible. And you can go the route that we did, which is to hire the consultant, because, I don't really want to be a tech savvy person in this area. I just want to have the vision for the farm and how to show it. And then I want to have the consultant just execute that vision. So for me, that worked out fine. But if it was my farm and I had my own personal interest in it, I'm sure I would probably, take to this myself and do it myself and learn it and be able to get the product out that I really wanted to get out. So with that, I think that brings us all to a conclusion. So I've, hopefully showed you the wide applications of it, the realty market, all the way to car buying, anything you can think of that you can see or walk through has potential for this 360 technology. The diversity of farms that we saw, hopefully you can see differences from site A to B to C to D. And then there's obviously many, many more that we haven't shown you. And that's, I think, where the real magic lies, is understanding the motivation for the farms, how they all are successful and maybe it looks different. And I think that's kind of the neat part of it. So at this point, I think I'm going to formally end the presentation. And if there's any questions in the chat box, I'll be glad to take them. I'll go ahead and stop share right now. All right, and we're back live.
Yeah, no questions yet, but I did put in the link to the webpage where you can access all of those tours. So if you want to grab that, it's in the chat box. Bookmark the page so you can navigate back to it. Brian has a question. I can see this moving into the future into a kit approach, that you lend the tech to a farm so that they can be added to the collection of tours. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what we're attempting to do with Maggie, is she's going to add a few more of these farms, to the OSU portfolio. But obviously, if you want to do your own, we can definitely tell you the consultant, that we used, and the farm prices are pretty reasonable. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think they were about $300 or $300 to $500 a piece. Maggie, is that right?
I think that's right. Yeah, it was. And it really, the time it takes to do this, the consultant is pretty efficient at it. And how much time did you say that you would spend on each farm? It
would be like 1 to 2 hours of the actual filming. And then he has another hour or two to get home to stitch it and put it all together. So really within probably a couple of days to a week, depending upon the schedule, it could be done. If you're doing it yourself, then, how much time you have to put toward it, you can crank it out that day if you really wanted to. But it's not like, it costs $10,000. It's really pretty reasonable, pretty accessible, especially the camera that I showed you, that Ricoh Theta Z1. There's another technology that we used on the Pumpkin project called Matterport, which is really the HD version of everything you've seen here. Very, very nice. And that can get pretty expensive for a lot of different reasons. But it's kind of like that next step up, but it's definitely a magnitude more in terms of price as well.
And of course, we're starting with farms, but it seems like, community gardens could apply this too. Especially some of those ones that are old and historic, and maybe victory gardens that have been around for since the first wave of victory gardens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box. You could also raise your hand and I could, ask you to unmute as well if you have, if you're more comfortable asking your question in that format.
And so in terms of the, the inspiration of people, I don't really know if you see it as something quite as exciting as I do or not, or if it has a place or not in your operation. But I think it's just kind of another way to differentiate yourself and to really kind of get your story out there and, be able to show your farm. And from an educational standpoint, for us, it's great to be able to show students or sort of people new to the urban ag space what the potentials are, what operations look like. Some are very pristine, some are a little rough around the edges, and everything in between. So not everyone's farm looks the same, not everyone's doing everything the same way. And so that, should give you a little bit of comfort. Well, maybe I can try it and I can do this 1 year and then I can, maybe expand my operation in years 2 and 3. So it's just kind of, I think it's a really neat tool to avoid the travel piece, to see farms all across the state while just sitting in front of your computer. And I do think it's a very real representation of the farm. I mean, nothing is edited out. We show up, we take the pictures and we stitch them together. We don't like edit out, there's a candy wrapper on the floor. We don't want to show that. We don't, if it's on the floor, it gets edited, we see it, that's just the way it is. And it's great that the things that, we see as putting it together as maybe being important, are things that you might care less about, but you're like, oh, I really want to take a closer look at that irrigation system. Why are they using drip or misters? And, what kind of dosatron is that? And why is it mounted up on the wall versus down on the ground? And so things like that, you just might get an idea as to why it's happening. That would be an area that if we thought was a big focus, we could go back and put one of those informational buttons on and either have a little, click on me, a little auditory piece about the fertigation, how we fertigate, about how the pump works, what kind it is. I mean, all those things can be added. And you could spend, as many hours as you want adding things to these models if you want. These are stripped down, bare bones, really very few interactive pieces. The pumpkin one that I did, it has a lot more of the kind of interactive pieces. You come up to the basically a big field. There's 30 different hybrids in it. You click on the hybrid list and it pops up all the information, the seed company, the size of the fruit, what the yield statistics are, all those kinds of things pop up as an information piece to each hybrid if you ask for it. And so those are the kinds of things that kind of add a bit more value. Like just seeing the pumpkin in the field, you're like, oh yeah, that's a nice looking pumpkin. But what else do you know about it? Well, I know now how big it is. I know how much it weighs. I know what the average is, per tons per acre, those kinds of statistics. Well, who sells that seed? Is it a powdery mildew tolerant or resistant variety or susceptible? I know that as well. So that's all kind of adds to the story of what's there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and some of the farms I'm looking forward to visiting next, they have really some special features like a really, a big wash and pack station, a on-site refrigeration, which is always a great one. And one of them has an on-site market that is just, they do so much with value added products that, just really special things about each farm that you can feature and see, looking from one farm to another. So
yeah,
that'll be exciting to add to the list. All right, I think we've lost 5 people already. They probably jumped over and they're like, well, I just want to go do the tour right now.
Well, let's hope so.
So yeah, again, I did put that in the chat box. So If anyone has any other questions, feel free. Make sure you join us next week too. Next week, we're going to get into composting with arthropods. So we're going to get more insect involved starting next weekend. And then we'll continue that theme into the last week too. Yeah, so thanks so much, Jim, for being here and presenting this, because I think it's, yeah, we're gonna keep using it and involving it in future programming. So it's great.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you for the opportunity to show that. And if there's any other questions, you can feel free to contact me or get a hold of Maggie to get my contact information. It should be pretty readily available. And thank you for your time. I do appreciate it, Maggie, for setting this all up. It's great job.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we'll be here next week. So I hope you're able to join us. And if not, if you missed some of the beginning of the presentation, we'll send out that recording the day before our next presentation next Friday. Okay. All right. Thanks so
Maggie.
much. We'll sign off here and hope to see you next week. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Yep. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.